Hello everyone, Dr. Isha this side, your fertility coach and nutritionist from Be Healthy with Dr. Isha. Today we are discussing a topic that is emotionally very difficult, yet extremely important, which is IVF failures. For many couples, IVF feels like their last hope, and when it doesn't work, it often leaves them confused, heartbroken, and full of unanswered questions. My intention with today's conversation is to bring clarity, understanding, and direction. I am joined today by Dr. Sneha Sathe from Nova IVF Mumbai. She is a clinical director and IVF specialist at this center. She has an extensive experience of managing complex IVF cases. Thank you so much, Dr. Sneha, for being here with us. It would be great if you can also give a brief introduction about you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Dr. Isha. The pleasure is all mine, especially when we are discussing such an important topic today. So I'm basically an obstetrician gynecologist with a special interest in fertility practice, and I'm practicing fertility and IVF since the past 15 years. And I'm associated with Nova IVF in Mumbai since the last 10 years.
Okay, that's great. That's good to know. To start with, many couples hear this term failed IVF, right? But they don't understand what it truly means. So, what exactly do we mean by a failed IVF cycle?
So when we talk about failed IVF, what people think is that an IVF cycle is done, an embryo transfer is done, and the pregnancy test is negative. But a failed IVF does not mean only a negative pregnancy test. An IVF cycle can have an unfavorable outcome at many different stages. For
Okay.
example, we have done a stimulation, the follicles have grown well, but when we do the egg retrieval, we don't get any eggs. Sometimes we get eggs, but those eggs don't fertilize. Many times it happens that the eggs also fertilize well, but the embryos don't grow as well as we want them to grow.
Right.
So these are the different stages at which an IVF cycle outcome will not be what we want it to be or what we expect it to be. And
Hmm.
of course, many times it happens that everything has gone well, the embryo transfer is done, and there is no pregnancy.
Right.
And it can also happen that there is a positive pregnancy, but that pregnancy does not continue, or there is a biochemical pregnancy or an early miscarriage. So
Hmm.
basically, a failed IVF is having an unfavorable outcome, a stage beyond which we cannot proceed with the same cycle.
Right. Right. So, you're trying to say there could be like many stages of a failed IVF cycle, right?
Yes,
So,
at many different points.
yes, yes, yes. And once the cycle fails, couple, naturally starts asking what could be the reasons, right? So from a medical perspective, what are the most common reasons behind a failed, IVF cycle?
So once we have an unfavorable outcome or a negative outcome in an IVF cycle, it is very important to pause and to reflect and
Mm.
not just go ahead and repeat what we have done earlier.
Right.
The most important reasons that an IVF cycle can fail or have a negative outcome is the embryo quality. And
Mm.
other reason, of course, is the uterus or the endometrium.
Mm.
Now, what happens in a routine IVF is that we do ovarian stimulation, we do egg retrieval, we
Mm.
fertilize the eggs to make embryos,
Yeah.
and we visualize the embryos, how the embryos are growing in the laboratory. Preferably, we wait to see whether the embryos are becoming blastocysts or not.
Mm.
Now, many times an embryo looks good,
Mm.
but it is not genetically normal. So,
Right.
whether the embryo is genetically normal or not normal, we don't come to know by just looking at the embryo.
Yeah.
So, one of the most common reasons that an IVF cycle gives a negative outcome is when the embryo is not genetically normal, which
Right.
means that if the number of chromosomes in the embryo is not what it should be, and
Mm-hmm.
the risk of having genetic abnormalities increases as a woman grows older.
Yeah.
So, as a woman ages, her egg reserve decreases, egg quality decreases, and having the risk of genetic abnormalities in the eggs increases. So, if
Right.
an egg is genetically abnormal, it leads to an abnormal embryo.
Mm.
And an abnormal embryo, most often, it does not implant successfully and leads to a negative pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes an abnormal embryo implants, but the
Mm.
pregnancy does not progress and it gives rise to an early miscarriage.
Mm.
So, most commonly, it is the embryo factor which leads to a negative pregnancy. The other reason also is a poor endometrial lining.
Mm.
Sometimes the lining is not good in quality, or the lining is not receptive, because
Right.
of which a good embryo fails to implant. You know,
Mm.
when I explain to patients, I like to give them the analogy of seed and soil.
Mm-hmm.
To have a good plant, you need to have a good quality seed and you need to
Right.
have a good receptive soil. If
Mm.
you have soil which is not fertile, even a good seed will not be able to grow well.
Yeah.
Likewise, you have a very good fertile, good seed, but very poor quality soil.
Hmm.
Again, that seed will fail to grow. So
Right.
what we need for a successful IVF outcome is a good embryo and a good endometrium.
Got it. So I have two questions basis on what you have just, said about the embryo quality and the egg quality. So first is that, we understand that the just grading of the embryo will not determine the success of the embryo. Even if it is a blastocyst, it is not a guarantee that it is going to implant itself and be a successful and healthy pregnancy, because the chromosomal abnormalities can lead to failure, right? But there are, certain tests like PGD testing. Do you have seen cases wherein in the PGT testing the embryo is chromosomally viable, it's a euploid embryo, but still the transfer was failed? So at that situation, what could be the possible reasons? I mean, patients are very furious to know, because they say everything was fine, endometrium lining was fine, the embryo quality was good, it was a PGT tested embryo, but still it failed. So at that time, what could be the reasons for the same?
So, everything said and done, there are no guarantees with IVF. When
Hmm.
everything is good, like you have a good embryo, you have a genetically normal embryo, you have a good lining, and
Hmm.
even if the lining is receptive, the
Hmm.
best success rates are around 60 to 70%. So
Hmm.
when everything is excellent, even then all women don't conceive. So
Hmm.
there is a lot which then depends on the chance factor. So, you feel that everything worked out well, but there is no pregnancy. So
Right.
as long as a woman has had a good quality embryo, she has a good lining, that is a good sign. It
Hmm.
only means that she needs to try again.
Right. Got it. Got it. And other thing was, you said that sometimes there is a issue with the endometrial lining. That's why, the implantation doesn't happen. But I'm sure when, the embryo transfer is happening, at that time, doctors are monitoring the, endometrial lining, and they make sure that the lining is of a sufficient, size, and the trilaminar structure and the blood vascularity is also good. Then in what cases do you believe that, the lining could be the reason? Is it, any issues related to maybe, blood clotting related factors or things like that?
So particularly when an IVF cycle has not worked out, we tend to go back and see how each step of the cycle had progressed.
Hmm.
We look at the stimulation protocol, we look at the drugs that were given, we see whether the number of eggs retrieved was similar to the number of follicles that had formed. We
Hmm.
see how the embryo quality was, and then we also take a look at how the lining looked.
Hmm.
Sometimes the lining looks good on sonography,
Hmm.
but it has some subtle changes of inflammation, some micro polyps, or the walls inside in the uterus
Yeah.
stuck to each other. And
Right.
some of these small changes are not visualized on ultrasound.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
if an IVF cycle has not worked out,
Hmm.
what we usually advise the patient is to get a hysteroscopy done to check her uterine lining from inside.
Right. Right.
Sometimes, in some situations, there are some things which we can obviously see on the ultrasound, like we can
Hmm.
see some polyps, or we may see adhesions, or we may see submucous fibroids. And
Right.
in these situations, we do a hysteroscopy even prior to the very first embryo transfer.
Hmm. Hmm. That's
In
right.
some scenarios, there are women with low egg reserve where the number of eggs retrieved is less or the number
Yeah.
of embryos formed is less.
Yeah.
So now in these women, we don't want to take any chance. You want to make sure that everything else is fine before doing the very first embryo transfer.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
a hysteroscopy is many times advised in these scenarios, and a hysteroscopy helps us evaluate how the uterus is from inside
Right.
before transferring the embryo.
Got it.
Now, hysteroscopy is not advised as a routine. We have to
Hmm.
carefully select which patients need a hysteroscopy.
Right.
Now,
Right.
the other thing is the endometrial receptivity array.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
this test is also an advanced test, and the evidence, frankly, regarding the ERA test is very mixed. So,
Yeah.
ERA is not, again, not advised as a routine, and we have to carefully select patients who might need ERA. Like,
Right.
for example, you have had very good embryos, you have had very good lining. The hysteroscopy also showed there was no problem in the cavity.
Hmm.
If two such embryo transfer cycles don't work out
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
good embryos and good lining, then
Hmm.
in those situations, we consider checking whether the lining was receptive on the
Okay.
day that we are doing the embryo transfer. So,
Hmm.
this receptivity issue basically is not common. It is very rare that we find that the window of implantation is shifted because of which the embryo is not implanting.
Hmm.
So this ERA test is advised in those scenarios.
Okay.
And if the ERA test shows that the receptivity is shifted,
Hmm.
then we plan the subsequent embryo transfer based on the implantation window that they give us in the report.
Right.
And then in these scenarios, those women have a better chance of a successful implantation in the next cycle.
Got it. And coming to, the next question, I think you explained this very well, understanding what could be the reasons, right? But the next question, as you mentioned, is that, the egg quality and the embryo quality could be a bigger, reason for IVF failures. So how should couples understand the difference between, embryo quality and egg quality?
So egg quality basically is the foundation. As a woman grows older, her egg reserve and her egg quality decrease, and the risk of having genetic abnormalities in the eggs increases. Now, we have a test for egg reserve, which is known as the AMH test, or checking the antral follicle count on ultrasound. But there are no tests for egg quality. The older a woman, the poorer her egg quality. The younger a woman, the better the egg quality. So egg quality is something we always comment on, retrospectively. We do an ovarian stimulation, we do the egg retrieval. Many times by looking at the eggs also, we can't say anything about the egg quality.
That's true.
And when we try to fertilize those eggs and make embryos is when we are able to look back and say, okay, it may be because of the eggs, or maybe the eggs were very good.
Right.
So a poor quality egg will lead to a poor quality embryo. A good quality egg from a younger woman usually leads to a good quality embryo.
Okay.
The genetics of the egg we cannot test, but we can test the genetics of the embryo. So an embryo basically forms when we fertilize the egg and sperm.
Right.
And then we wait to see whether the embryo grows to become a blastocyst. In some scenarios, we do PGT.
Yeah. Okay. Does PGT also leads to loss of the embryos? That's what I have heard.
So PGT, for doing PGT, basically the embryologist needs to be trained really well and needs to be validated.
Right.
And PGT done by validated and trained embryologists is done very well, and we don't lose the embryos in PGT.
Right.
So PGT, again, Dr. Isha, there are three types of PGT. One is PGT-A, one is PGT-M, and then there is PGT-SR. So PGT-A is PGT for aneuploidy, and this is the one that is done most commonly.
Yes.
PGT-A just helps us check whether the number of chromosomes is normal in the embryo. It is for chromosome number check. Now, these number abnormalities, like having an extra chromosome or having a less chromosome, these number abnormalities, the risk increases with age.
Yes.
Like we all know, as a woman grows older, the risk of Down syndrome increases. Now, Down syndrome is a chromosome number abnormality.
Right.
And these are the abnormalities that we can find out on PGT-A. So PGT-A is usually advised when the woman is 35 or 37 years old or older than that.
Right.
It is sometimes advised if she has had negative IVF or multiple previous miscarriages. Sometimes if a woman has had a previous Down syndrome pregnancy. So these are the scenarios in which we advise PGT-A.
Okay.
Now, PGT-M is PGT for monogenic disorders.
Okay.
So in some couples, there is a history of genetic illness in the family, like somebody having sickle cell disease or thalassemia or Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Yeah.
So these are the conditions in which we can find out on PGT-M.
Okay.
And the last one is PGT-S. PGT-SR is PGT for structural rearrangement. So in some couples, they have multiple miscarriages. And when we do a karyotype for the couple, we find that there is a balanced or a reciprocal translocation, which led to these miscarriages.
Right.
So this is PGT-SR is used to identify an embryo which does not have this translocation in these particular couples. So these are the three different types of PGT, and there are very specific indications to advise PGT.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for explaining that in detail. Now I want to talk about, the most important thing, that because we have been focusing on egg quality and we talked about embryo quality, but one thing I think that we have missed is the male factor, right? I have, read about certain studies which have recently come up, which says that, sperm quality really gets affected with as we age. The egg quality do get affected, but more than that, the sperm quality is something, which we have missed over the years. So, can you also talk about how sperm quality lead to the IVF failure, and how do you usually evaluate this at your center?
So the sperm factor, it is something that is often overlooked, often underestimated. And particularly when there is a negative IVF, it is important, just as we reevaluate and recheck regarding the eggs and stimulation and endometrium, we also need to take a look again at the sperm factor.
Hmm.
In a routine semen analysis, all that is checked is the sperm count, sperm motility, and morphology.
Right.
And based on these parameters, IVF is advised or ICSI is advised,
Hmm. Hmm.
ICSI. So I'll just explain in brief what the difference between the two is. The difference in IVF and ICSI is basically the difference in the technology that is used in the laboratory to fertilize the eggs.
Hmm.
To do IVF, with one egg, many sperm are kept.
Hmm.
And the sperm are supposed to fertilize the egg naturally.
Right.
For ICSI, the embryologist has to identify the mature egg and has to inject a sperm directly into the
Hmm.
egg.
Hmm.
So ICSI is advised where there are sperm parameter abnormalities.
Okay.
Now, in spite of doing ICSI, sometimes we don't get good quality embryos,
Hmm.
or we get an embryo, but there is no pregnancy.
Yeah.
So in these scenarios, we need to go back and look at the sperm factor. Now,
Hmm.
there is an additional test called DNA fragmentation.
Yeah.
Many times we find that the semen analysis, the count, motility, everything looks fine. But
Hmm.
if the DNA fragmentation index is high in
Right.
that semen sample, there
Hmm.
is a risk that we don't get good quality embryos. And
Right.
sometimes we get embryos, but that woman has a higher risk of having miscarriage.
Hmm.
So if the DFI of that male partner or the husband is increased, then
Hmm.
we advise some antioxidants. Then we advise them to have a lesser abstinence when they give the semen sample.
Right.
And in some scenarios, when the DNA fragmentation is very high, we even advise to use testicular sperm instead of ejaculated sperm for
Okay.
ICSI.
Okay.
In addition to
For
this
that,
DFI, there are
so for that you
yeah,
do the procedure called TESSA, right? For the
ISA, yeah, yes,
testicular sperm.
yes.
Right.
Yes. So the different indications for using testicular sperm is in a husband when there is a zero sperm count.
Yeah.
The sperm count is sometimes zero because of primary
Hmm.
testicular failure because sperm are not being produced or because they are produced in very low quantity and
Right.
we try to retrieve them from the testes. And sometimes the sperm count is zero because there is some obstruction which is not allowing the sperm to come out.
Hmm.
So these are the two scenarios primarily where we use testicular sperm.
Hmm.
And having a high DNA fragmentation is one of the indications for using testicular sperm. It is said that the sperm which are there in the testes have the lowest DNA fragmentation. So
Okay.
couples who repeatedly have poor quality embryos or negative IVF outcomes or recurrent miscarriages in whom
Right.
we have found that the DFI is increased.
Hmm.
In such a couple, we might advise use of testicular sperm.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Now coming to my, last question, after one or more failed IVF cycles, couples are often advised additional tests, which you were also talking about, like ERA, hysteroscopy, PGT. So what do you think who truly benefits from these tests? Because they are very overwhelming, and I'm sure, they also require a financial, investment in terms of, getting these tests done. So who do you think can actually benefit from these kind of tests?
So hysteroscopy, PGT, and ERA are advanced tests, and these should not be advised as a routine blanketly for all couples. We need to carefully select who needs these. Now, to do a hysteroscopy, we usually keep a low threshold. A
Hmm.
hysteroscopy is to check in a hysteroscopy, basically a camera is passed through the vagina into the uterus to visualize the uterus from inside.
Right.
And if any abnormalities are found, those abnormalities are cleared at the same time. Now,
Hmm.
a hysteroscopy is very minimally invasive. There are no cut, there are no stitches. In many places, a hysteroscopy is done without anesthesia. So
Right.
the amount of time that needs to stay in the hospital is also very low.
Hmm.
So basically, a hysteroscopy is advised when we find some abnormalities in the endometrial lining on ultrasound,
Hmm.
like polyps or adhesions or submucous fibroids.
Hmm.
In some scenarios, we advise hysteroscopy if there has been a previous negative IVF cycle, or
Hmm.
if she has very few embryos and we want to make sure that there are no other abnormalities.
Right.
So these are the indications of getting a hysteroscopy done.
Hmm.
Now, PGT is pre-implantation genetic testing, and this again, there are three types, like I mentioned earlier, PGT-A, M, and SR.
Right.
So PGT-A is the one that is done most commonly, and that is usually advised when the woman is of advanced age.
Hmm.
The idea is to find embryos which are genetically euploid to
Hmm.
transfer to the uterus.
Right.
So if an embryo looks good, but if it's not genetically euploid or the chromosome number is not normal,
Hmm.
usually it doesn't lead to a pregnancy.
Yeah.
And in older women, the risk of having these number abnormalities in the chromosomes of the embryos is higher. So we
Right.
prefer to do PGT just to make sure that the embryo is euploid and then transfer that embryo.
Mm-hmm.
So if we transfer a euploid embryo, the chance of pregnancy improves and the risk of miscarriage also decreases.
Mm.
And that's why PGT-A is considered in women who are 35 plus, particularly 37 plus. And the
Okay.
last one is ERA, endometrial receptivity array.
Mm.
That again is an advanced test. The evidence regarding ERA is very mixed. So we need to carefully select women who might benefit from doing the ERA test.
Mm-hmm. Got it. One thing just I wanted to ask you, being a nutritionist and a fertility coach, what I have seen is many couples, who have had failed IVF cycles, they want to take some break, right? And then maybe, start with the cycle again just to improve their chances of success. What changes do you suggest as an IVF specialist to these couples, who have had? Do you suggest that they should take a break for some time, heal their bodies and maybe recover emotionally from the, whatever they have gone through? Or do you suggest that, they should continue with their treatment because now doctors will be able to identify what went wrong and maybe change the protocol next time? What do you think would be a better, option?
So the first IVF cycle basically gives us a lot of information.
Hmm.
If the IVF cycle doesn't have a good outcome, we try to identify the stages at which things might have not worked well, and we try to change those to have a better outcome the
Right,
next time.
right.
So if the couple is young and
Hmm.
the woman has a good egg reserve,
Mm-hmm.
I tell them that you take a break. If you want to take a break, you take
Yeah.
your time off and then come back after a couple of months. A couple of months will not make much of a difference if she's young and if her reserve is good.
Yeah.
In contrast, if the couple is older, if the woman is older, then I
Hmm.
tell them don't take a break too long. The
Okay.
sooner you get back into IVF, the better it is. So it entirely depends on that particular couple's situation. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I always tell them that lifestyle changes is something which should be ongoing.
Of
You
course.
know, making some changes today is not going to have an impact tomorrow. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to have your lifestyle changes on a daily day in and day out basis. You need to have a balanced diet. You need to exercise regularly. You need
Absolutely.
to sleep well.
Yeah.
Need to avoid junk food,
Mm.
avoid preservative food. So these are the things that they need to do on a daily
The
routine.
pieces. Yes. Yes, that's true. That's true. Okay, then. Thank you so much, Dr. Sneha, for explaining this so clearly and honestly. I'm sure this conversation will help many couples understand that IVF failure is not about blame, right? It's about finding the right answers and the next steps. To everyone watching, please remember a failed IVF cycle doesn't mean the end of the journey. With right guidance, there is always a way forward. So, before we end this conversation, I want you, Dr. Sneha, to say any concluding words to your audience, to anyone who's watching, to anyone who is seeking your treatment and have had, going through IVF. So, any words for them?
So the most important thing that I would like to tell people is that having a poor outcome in one IVF cycle is not the end of the road. That one negative cycle teaches us a lot,
Right.
and we are able to apply those learnings in the subsequent IVF cycle. So it is very, very important not to give up.
Hmm.
One negative cycle does not mean that all the cycles in the future are going to have the same outcome.
That's true. That's true. So I think I read somewhere where it mentioned that, IVF is a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? So you have to keep on
Absolutely.
running and, see when it works for you. Okay.
Absolutely. Totally.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So if you found this video,
Thanks so much.
thank you, Dr. Sneha. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more expert fertility conversations. If you want to contact Dr. Sneha in future, I'll post her contact details in the description below. Thank you so much and stay healthy. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sneha.